Greetings, friends. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In today's episode, I spoke with a St. Louis construction lawyer turned general counsel. He was part of the executive team who recently completed the sale of their company and going private transaction. We discussed his legal career, his father's legacy, what he's most proud of while in private practice and in-house, and his approach to leadership, and so much more. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on iTunes. We interview corporate defense law firm leaders, partners, general counsel, and legal consultants. You're listening to episode number 60 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of both men and women serving as leaders and executives in the legal industry. Enjoy a front row seat as Chris Batts speaks with general counsel, legal consultants, and law firm leaders and law partners at the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mark Menghini, former Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary of Aegion. Mark was on the executive leadership team of 3 and the top legal executive for Aegion before their buyout this year. He also served as the interim general counsel and deputy general counsel at Aegion. Prior to going in-house, Mark was an officer and shareholder with the law firm of Greensfelder, Hemker, and Gale, PC, a regional law firm based in St. Louis, Missouri, where he practiced as a member of the firm's construction law practice group. Mark received his law degree from Washington University School of Law, St. Louis. Welcome, Mark, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
So, Mark, let's just jump in. As I've been learning, you're the son of a very well-regarded, highly regarded St. Louis attorney. I just wanted to ask you, did you intend on becoming an attorney? Or I noticed that at Northwestern, you got an undergrad in English.
Yeah, no, my mom wanted a doctor, Chris. And so, and I just wanted to get some money from somewhere. It didn't really matter to me when I was younger. And I went into undergrad thinking I might go to med school. And, when you cheat your way to a C in first year chemistry, it's a pretty telltale sign that you're not going to be Dr. Mark Menghini. So I switched my undergraduate degree at some point early on to English. And I had thoughts of maybe becoming a teacher or maybe becoming a lawyer. I just hadn't really thought it through that far ahead of time, when I was a freshman, sophomore at college. As I got closer to graduating, the thought of going to law school became more and more appealing. And honestly, Chris, when I went to law school, I went in with the thought process of, I might hate this and I'll just find something else to do. Or I might like it, and then maybe I'll be good at it. Who knows? And so I had an open mind about it, but it was not something I was ever driven to do. As you said, my dad was very well respected, probably still is a very well respected attorney in St. Louis. I have an uncle who's an attorney in St. Louis. My older brother's an attorney in St. Louis. My older sister's an attorney. And so I wanted to do something different. I just didn't know what it was. And law school was kind of take a shot and see how it works out. And, obviously, I'm here 23 years later, still practicing law, but I loved it. I loved law school. I loved my classmates. I loved the topics. And then once I started actually practicing law, I thrived and just really, really enjoyed the practice of law.
That's so fun. So at Wash U, did they roast you because of your dad and your siblings?
No, they didn't roast me. I probably got a little bit more credit than I deserve by a couple of the professors. Okay. There was one in particular, he's the quintessential paper chase constitutional law professor named Jules Girard. And he was probably 80 years old by the time I went through. Old friend of my dad's. And he was the guy everybody was afraid of among other professors there. Yeah. And I remember one day he gave me a question in class and I screwed it completely up. And I heard about it a week later from my dad. And he says, I played poker with Professor Girard on Friday night. And he tells me he gave you a total layup in class and you completely screwed it up. Like, well, Dad, tell Professor Girard that I didn't study the night before. Sorry, I'll try to do better next time. But it didn't help me any that the professors were running to my dad and telling him how I screwed up in class. Yeah.
Nothing like a little bit of accountability there. Talk to me about this transition. So once you were in law school, I'm sure, employers were knocking on your door and you were maybe considering a summer and or looking at law firm or in-house. Was it the goal to go in-house or go to a law firm?
Never the goal to go in-house. Always assumed I was going to go to a law firm. My first year summer, my dad actually got me a job with a friend of his who had a very small plaintiff's firm, personal injury firm. And I learned very quickly that summer that wasn't something I wanted to do for a number of reasons. And so my second summer, I started interviewing everywhere. And, I was probably had resumes out to a dozen of the major law firms in St. Louis. And one night I was at the Missouri Athletic Club. I don't know if you know St. Louis Missouri Athletic Club downtown.
I do.
But my dad was a member for 40 years. And so I used to sneak over there after work or after school and get a workout in, then go down to the bar. And I was down in the bar early second year of law school during this process of looking for a second summer job. And I struck up a conversation with an older guy next to me, and we had a beer together, and then we grabbed a table and, just enjoying each other's company and had a pitcher of beers together. And at some point he said, what do you do? And I said, I'm in law school. So what do you do? He said, well, I'm a senior partner at a law firm downtown. And I said, oh, which firm? And he said the name Greensfelder. And Greensfelder wasn't on my radar for whatever reason. It just wasn't. A terrific firm, but it just wasn't on my radar. And I said, well, I haven't sent a resume over there. And he says, you send me your resume tomorrow and I'll put it in the right hands and make sure you get, some attention and somebody, gives you a look-see. And the rest is history. I did my interview there and fell in love with the place and the people I talked to that day. Was hoping, all my fingers crossed that I'd get the offer for that second year summer. And I did, obviously, and the rest is history. But it was just fortuitous. I felt more comfortable at Greensfelder from the moment I walked in and met the people by a factor of 100 than any other firm I had talked to.
Wow.
It was one of those kismet things. And some of those people that I talked to that day are still, I consider still very close friends of mine. So that's why I ended up at Greensfelder. And then they gave me the job offer to come back after law school, and I happily accepted it.
And so you progressed in the construction practice? Were you always in the construction practice?
I was always in the construction practice. My second year summer when I did that, I was in general litigation. And I don't have a construction background, as you know. I've got an English degree. I never even worked construction, in the summers. And I finished my second year summer in the litigation department, and they said, okay, we'll see you next fall. They gave me the job offer. I accepted. And a week before, and I can remember this like it was yesterday, a week before I started, after taking the bar exam in the fall of 1998, I get a letter from Greensfelder, and it says, congratulations, next week, we look forward to seeing you. You're going to be starting in the construction group. And I picked up the phone and called somebody there and said, I think you made a mistake. I did my summer in the litigation group. And apparently I didn't, no one in the litigation group was enthralled by me that summer, I assume, but there were some trades that were made, and somehow I ended up in the litigation or the construction group, which is its own litigation group on its own island. Best thing that ever happened to me, Chris. I mean, it was like I kept falling into great opportunities at Greensfelder, starting with meeting that guy at the bar. That was by far the best thing that happened to me. The people in that group were just fantastic friends, colleagues, mentors. Every good word you can say about them is how I would describe them. The people that were there then, the people that are there now. And they became my close friends. They became my trusted mentors. They taught me the practice of law, much more than I think I could have gotten anywhere else on the planet, to be honest with you. And I became a construction lawyer, big C, big L, learning under them. And that means something to construction lawyers. There's lawyers that handle construction cases, and then there's construction lawyers. And I consider myself, when I left, and probably still do today, a construction lawyer as a result of coming up under that tutelage.
Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, legal recruiter and owner of the Lion Group. My team and I place legal and compliance talent around the United States and are known for our level of communication, speed, and strong track record. If you're an employer hiring your first attorney or first general counsel, or adding talent to your corporate legal department or compliance team, we should talk. Also, if you're a corporate defense law partner or group wondering about your options for a lateral move, we should also talk. Every aspect of our process is confidential, fast, and thorough. Contact us by going to our website, findthelions.com, or you can text the word headhunter to the number 44222, and then complete the web form and we'll follow up with you shortly. Now back to the show. What sort of engagements were you put on? What sort of matters did you handle in the construction practice?
We primarily did commercial construction. We stayed away from residential. You'd find yourself handling a residential case here and there every few years because somebody's big client was building a house and, the window was a half an inch one way as opposed to somewhere else, and their spouse didn't like that. And so let's sue the construction company and get them to tear the wall down and rebuild the house. Those cases never go well. There's a reason why we didn't handle them, because nobody likes doing construction cases for residential work. It's like a messy divorce, is the way I always felt about it. So we did very rarely any of that. So all of our work was in the commercial space. We represented, and I was very fortunate because they had a stable of clients that were high-class commercial construction engineering and contracting firms. The big, mechanical engineering companies, subcontractors, and electrical engineering subcontractors in St. Louis, large contracting firms like Alberici and McCarthy, large engineering firms like Jacobs, that gave us a ton of work, and not just in St. Louis, but across the country. And so my practice started out like every other construction lawyer. You're handling mechanics liens and things like that for a couple of years. But where I diverged pretty quickly in my career was I was fortunate enough to be put with a older associate who then, by the end of the case, was a young partner, a guy named Andy Manuel. He and I were paired up on a very large, at that time we thought it was large, $17 million case where we were defending a company called Lafarge, the world's biggest manufacturer of cement. And the reason Andy and I got that case is because the older partners in the construction department were busy with another case for Lafarge at that time, which was like a $100 million claim. And they just didn't have the attention that they could devote to it. So Andy and I got this wonderful opportunity. I think I was 3 years out of school at the time, maybe 3.5, to take this case soup to nuts from beginning to end and arbitrate it for 4 weeks in Chicago. And we not only was it a terrific learning lesson, but 4 weeks of roll up your sleeves arbitration, we'll take it out of you. We were against a guy out of Pittsburgh. I won't say his name, but he was known by people we talked to in Pittsburgh as the Darth Vader of law in Pittsburgh. And when I met him, he proved to be so, and just not a nice guy. And I'll say, you learn so much from the people you practice with and against, some good things, some bad things. I learned a lot of bad things about how not to practice law from this guy. Dismissive, won't shake your hand, doesn't, if you're not at his level, he doesn't give you any attention whatsoever in the room. We really had a lot of fun for 4 weeks trying the case against him. And when we got done, I took a breath. My wife and I got married, went on our honeymoon, and we went to Hawaii. The day we checked into the Four Seasons in Maui, there was a 17-page arbitration award decision waiting for me at the front desk. And my secretary at the time, on the cover page in all caps, just says, "Congratulations." So nice. We got a complete defense verdict to that case. It was a complicated case, too. It was interesting. And I think we got $4 or $5 million in counterclaims that we had developed almost out of whole cloth along the way as we put the case together. And the interesting thing about those counterclaims was they weren't illegitimate by any means, but a good attorney would have probably pressed the issue and dug into them a little bit to try and discredit them or try and lessen the amount of them. When we got into the counterclaim portion of the case, we had several large binders back in those days. Nothing was electronic. And I started to talk about the backup for the first counterclaim, or the first counterclaim change order. And this attorney on the other side, the Darth Vader attorney, stands up and he says, "We concede to quantification of all of their claims." And he said it as though these are all illegitimate. We're not even going to bother taking the time to talk about them. We'll concede to quantification. And I said, okay. And I remember the arbitrator, a guy named Paul Lurie up in Chicago, looked at me, and I looked at him and I said, okay. And the rest is history. So in the arbitration award, we got full value for all of them. And he made a point of saying the attorney on the other side conceded. So the quantification of these claims is unquestioned. And I'm sure the client had some things to say about that at the time when that award came down. But it was such a great feeling. And I'm sure my wife was tired of watching me read it over and over and over on our honeymoon. Right. But this is a long way of saying that was 3.5, 4 years into my career there. And it probably went a long way in putting me on the map in the group as somebody that could be effective in the group. And from that point forward, I was always on a team of 4 attorneys, partners, all of us, that handled nothing but big ticket, big litigation for our clients. Starting with a huge case in 2000 that went to trial in 2007. It was a 100-day jury trial in St. Louis. We got a defense verdict on that. 100 days of jury trial, Chris. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We had a baby in the middle of it, probably conceived the baby at the beginning of it. It was one of those mega cases that takes the life out of you. But when you win it, my God, what a feeling. And then from that one, it was the next $100 million case, this one in Las Vegas. And when you're defense attorney, your construction attorney, these are big, hairy, complicated cases, and they suck up all your time. And so the good thing is when you get to work each day, you got plenty to work on. You never have to scratch out hours. The bad thing is there's just so much to do, and there's so much traveling required. And, in that case, this next case was in Las Vegas. I was going there a couple times a month. It was in federal court. The judge wouldn't let us just call in for the status conferences. I'd have to get on a plane at 6 a.m, fly to Vegas, jump in a cab, race to the courthouse, race back to the airport, get on a plane, fly back home. And I missed 2 of my kids' birthdays one year doing that because she didn't know, but she scheduled them on the birthdays. And this is a federal judge, and you don't tell them, can we move it because it's the birthday at my house, But that's just part of the job. But that's started to lead me away from wanting to continue with the job when another opportunity came up. Which was when I transitioned over to in-house after 15 years.
So let's talk about that. So you were approached by Aegion. Was Aegion the only company that you had maybe entertained going in-house, or was it completely out of the blue?
I never entertained going in-house, Chris, for any company, including Aegion. It wasn't on my career track. At Greensfelder, they gave me so many wonderful opportunities over the years, not only to take on, interesting, complicated matters and give you the trust to take on those matters and be on those great teams, but also on board governance. I was, on committees from the time I can remember, and then transitioned onto the board of directors and the executive committee soon after becoming a shareholder in 2007. And loved it. Greensfelder was my home, Chris. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was the place that I considered my home. My wife was there at the same time. My whole career there, she came a year after I did. We're the same age, but she took a year off after college, and so was a year behind in law school. And I introduced her to the firm. We were friends at the time. And so that was my family. I never thought about leaving. But, after so many years of grinding through cases, and then, missing birthdays and being on a plane and having all the windshield time that comes along with that, and being away from home with 2 little kids at the time, when 2013 rolled around, I was embroiled. We were going to trial that fall in that Las Vegas case, and that was taking up all my time. In about maybe January of 2013, Aegion's general counsel, a guy named David Morris, good colleague when I was there and a good friend before and still, called me up, and we had lunch one day, and he said, look, I need to find a successor, and I really want you to think about coming in, and we'll create a deputy general counsel role for you, and groom you to take over the general counsel role. And I said, I'm not interested, because I wasn't. And I also said, look, even if I was interested, I'm in the middle of this case, and this case is going to trial this year. I can't even think about doing that. And I sure as hell wouldn't walk away from the case. My closest mentor and closest friend and I were working on that case together. And there's no way I would abandon him in the middle of it. Well, 9 months of hard work later, we settled the case in September of 2013. And David, and I talked, and I said, I'm coming back up for air here, and I can finally take on other matters again. And he said, look, I still am interested in discussing with you what we talked about before. Would you give it any thought? And it was just one of those turning points in my life, Chris, where I was tired. I felt like I'd done it all at the firm. I'd had the great cases. I had a lot of great success there. We worked very, very hard to get there. Had been on every level of board governance all the way to the top. And I felt like I was tired. And this was something that, what? Why not just do something completely different? Make a change in my career. If it didn't work out, I always felt like I could go back to private practice pretty quickly. And I figured I would know very quickly if I didn't like it. And, the other side of it was my wife was at Greensfelder too. All of our eggs are in one basket. Not that Greensfelder was going anywhere, but you do think about that, when you're talking with your spouse about financial planning and where things can head.
Absolutely.
And she and I, she'll probably kill me for saying this, but at that time I was on the board of directors and she was running the biggest department in the firm, the litigation department. And her interests as the leader of the litigation department aren't always, like any leader of any department, aren't always fully aligned with the interests of the board of directors and where they think the company should be or the firm should be. And honestly, this is no surprise to her if she ever listens to this, God help her. I'd come home and, I'd be fighting all day being as a litigator and then come home and be fighting at night about firm management issues because the board didn't do something she wanted to do. I said, well, I voted in your favor. The board didn't vote in your favor, probably lied half the time about that. But I was like, I can't fight at home about company things. Like, this isn't going to work out for me anymore, And so it was just a confluence of a million things that came together at once. And I said, you know what, David, let's give it a shot. I'll try it. I'll come on in. And we'll see how it works out. And, again, like I said before, the rest is history. 8 years with the company, would have spent my whole career at Aegion, if not for the recent sale of the company to private equity and the change in all senior management as a result of that.
So you took David's offer and came in-house. Was that a smooth landing, transitioning from a high-paced competitive environment, not Greensfelder being competitive, but knowing that you're a litigator and winning cases and things like that, and then going into a corporation with one client? Talk about that transition. What was that like?
Yeah, in the respect of, you're not winning cases anymore, but you're still being just as effective, right? Yep. I mean, not many cases go to trial, as you know. A lot of cases are settled way before trial. And so the value I always put on myself as what I considered to be a good construction attorney was being effective for my client, getting the effective result for them, understanding what was the right result for them, and then getting them there. Sometimes you have to counsel your client that way to tell them what the right result is because they're looking at it the wrong way. Sometimes they counsel you, and then you just have to move the pieces to get them there. So going into in-house at Aegion, while I wasn't litigating anymore, I was still handling all their cases in the sense of I was quarterbacking the litigation now, and to the extent that I wasn't doing things in court, I was actively working on those cases outside of court. For instance, when I came in, they had, a dozen big ticket pieces of litigation across the company. And Aegion does work global. And so they had stuff everywhere, and it was all hairy. And a few of them were really just big cases. Time sucks for the company. Time sucks for their counsel, inside and outside. Very, very expensive. One of them in particular was a case down in the Southeast. And it was one of these cases that if it didn't go right, it was going to be very expensive for the firm or for the company. And regardless of it going right, it was going to be very expensive for the company to make it go right and get there, 5 years from now in litigation. And so it was probably the most rewarding case that I handled while I was there because it had so much hair and historical problems with it. And I got my arms around it. And what I learned was a lot of this came from personal animosity between the client down in the Southeast, a municipality down their city, and our internal folks. And so the first thing I did after realizing that was opened up lines of communication with the attorneys inside that municipality who also had big personality problems with our folks. And I had to go down there and eat a lot of crap and just say, look, I'm new here and let's start over, new page. I'm not the bad guy. Let's just talk about the case and set the emotions to the side. And that took 2 or 3 trips down to this city to get them to that point where they would do that. Once those lines of communications were open and they understood, all right, the past is the past, let's look at the present and get off this freeway, then we were able to put together mediation, which we hadn't been able to do before. They came to the table. And then it was me most of the time and the in-house counsel for the municipality that hammered out the details of the settlement that ultimately came to fruition. That was something that I realized I didn't have to go win a case, so to speak, in litigation to feel value. which is a big change when you go in-house. Or, how do you feel value? You're not bringing in clients anymore, so you can't point to all the fees you brought in as this is why I'm better than you. And you can't point to the wins in courts or in arbitration as to this is why I'm better than you or this is why I'm good. You don't have those metrics to point to anymore. So how do you prove your value? And for me, proving value at Aegion was being that effective person that could get them out of these historical hairy claims and then set them on the right track. And, that was the second side of it, is like setting the company on the right track was understanding where their culture had issues, in my opinion, and then convincing them, senior management, CEO, all the way down, how to change that culture and instituting things that would change the culture. The way they approach risk assessment and contract negotiation, the way they approach disputes on projects, the way they approach litigation. I approached all those things completely different than the company did at that time, from the CEO down. And from the time I got there to the time I left, we had a sea change in culture shift on those. And it was a lot of hard work by me and the members of my team, who always get the credit for all the good things that happen at the company, because they worked their butts off. But it was an effective culture change. And the company, by the time we sold it, was radically different in terms of the way they approached professional contracting, risk assessment, and resolving disputes in real time, not having litigation anymore, not having things lead to lawsuits or arbitrations that didn't need to be. We resolved, as the attorneys in-house, all the things and did the work that we would have done as outside counsel and historically did as outside counsel before we came in. And that's where we showed we could be effective for the company and save them money and really change the way the company approached the way it did work and resolved issues. And I'm really, that's one of the things I'm most proud of, to be honest with you, Chris, is how we as a team at Aegion and the legal department were able to implement those changes and change the culture of the company to make it a much better place.
That's extraordinary. Thank you for sharing that, Mark. Let's pivot. I would like to hear from you. Who is Aegion? Just give us a little bit of a background, and then let's just talk about this going private transaction.
Sure. So Aegion is a global contracting company that protects infrastructure. So when you think about Aegion, you can really boil them down into the three segments that they really are. It's just three segments. One is called their Infrastructure Solutions Group. And what they primarily do is replace aging pipelines, wastewater lines, your sewer lines. So when you have a sewer that's going bad for any given reason, there's two ways to do it, essentially. One, you can dig up neighborhoods and streets from manhole to manhole and put a new pipe in. Or two, you can do what In Situ Form did, and it's what used to be a proprietary method that they developed in the 70s and 80s called cured in place pipe. And what that means is you basically, and I won't go into the engineering details of it, but to put it simply, you basically blow a wet sock from one manhole to the other. You fill that wet sock with hot air or hot water. That kicks off a chemical reaction, and that wet sock becomes a sewer within the sewer. It form fits to the existing sewer, provides it 100 or 50-year warranty life, is maybe a half-inch thick. And then you have a guy in a truck that sends a robot in there, and he's got a camera and a saw on that robot. He sits in a truck with two little joysticks, and he looks for all the laterals that come from the homes that go into the sewer. And he takes his saw and he puts it right on those little dimples and cuts them out. And then you pick up your materials and your equipment and you move to the next manhole. You don't have to dig up the street. You don't dig up neighborhoods. It's not intrusive whatsoever. And it's just a wonderful way to rehabilitate aging infrastructure. So that was Infrastructure Solutions, in large part, was In Situ Form. Then we had what's called cathodic protection. And cathodic protection was primarily corrosion protection. So when you think about pipelines, primarily, when a company puts a pipeline in the ground, it's a piece of steel, right? It's got a coating on it. That coating on it is to protect the steel from physical damage and also from corrosion. But that's not enough on its own. And once a pipeline is in the ground or in water, there are a number of things that their only goal in life is to attack that pipeline, get through that coating, and corrode that steel. So what cathodic protection does is you physically attach anodes to the outside of a pipe at various intervals. And then you attach those anodes to what's called a rectifier, a little electrical box, and it puts a little impressed current on the outside of the pipe. So it won't hurt you, the current, but it's enough that all those things I talked about that are trying to attack the pipe, they go elsewhere. They're not attracted to the pipe anymore. They're attracted to something else because of that impressed current on the pipe. That's about as good as an English major can describe that process. Luckily, I never had to describe it in court, but that's what corrosion protection did. They also had a number of other business units in the platform that did interior and exterior coatings of welds as pipelines were being put in various places throughout the world. And then finally, their third platform did maintenance for refineries. So there are 17 refineries up and down the West Coast. They refine oil for California gas. California gas stations have to live up to a certain refinery, regulation for the gas they sell. These refineries produce that gas. If you've ever seen or been in a refinery, it's basically a giant city that's trying to fall apart and blow up and destroy itself. It's in a constant state of degradation. So our third platform was called Energy Services. Their job was to send crews. I think we had made long-term contracts with 15 of the 17 refineries when I left. Their job was to send crews each day to those refineries, and the refinery managers would tell them what to do. Go fix this, go fix that, do this project, do that project. And that's what they did day in and day out to keep those refineries from falling apart, which then in turn is a major safety hazard, right? People working there can get killed. People in the communities can get killed. You have a major explosion at a refinery, and it's a serious business. So that's basically what the company did in a long nutshell.
That's exciting. Yeah, and it's so critical. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of civic pipes that are being destroyed or corroded just by time. I'm sure you guys have been busy, which is that the reason why you've got private equity knocking on your door is just definitely the sustainability and durability of the company?
I think that's in large part, infrastructure is a hot topic right now. Everybody wants to be in the infrastructure business. The private equity company that bought us had started an infrastructure fund. I want to say it was $10 billion fund, but I could be wrong on that. And there were, one or two other private equity companies that were interested. One in particular that drove our stock price up on the sale. That had its own infrastructure fund. And Aegion, by the time we sold, we'd been through 7 years of restructuring. We had fixed what we thought were all the historical problems with the company that were holding it back, from really hitting on all cylinders. COVID hit, of course, which, delayed that process somewhat. But once we were getting out of COVID in December 2020, we felt great about the company and we were excited to see what it could do. We were getting out of years of restructuring. We had fixed the problems and it was a well-run company that was going to be profitable again. And of course, private equity, they're not dumb. They see that and they want that. And so we had them approach us in December 2020 and approached our board with an offer. And that started a process that culminated in a sale of the company in May of 2021.
Was it expected? I mean, did you guys was it through an intermediary, like a investment banker or something you guys were exploring?
No, we had been through a private auction process in the fall of 2019.
Okay.
Where we invited, I want to say, a dozen PE firms and strategic partners through our investment bank Centerview to come talk to management on a very confidential basis, very quiet basis. The last thing you want is for your company to think you're on the block.
Yeah.
And at the end of that process in September 2019, we got a number of bids, none of which were at a dollar amount that our board at that time would consider. And we didn't think they should either. We were happy with the board's decision that they didn't take any of those and they shut down the process. One of those companies is the private equity firm that ultimately came back a year and a half later and really came out of the blue on this and pitched another offer to our board for a higher amount. And that got the conversation started again. Remember, we're coming out of COVID at the time. And, there's still some uncertainties that come along with that period of time. We're still in COVID. Here we are almost a year later. But in December 2020, you hoped that there was silver lining, but the vaccines hadn't been out yet. There was no telling when exactly they might get out and how effective they'd be and, what the world would look like in the next year. So when they approached us, the board, rightfully so, couldn't say no. They came to us with a number that was a very good number. And we engaged in discussions that ultimately led to a deal getting hammered out at a higher number than that. In February, I think it was February 10th of 2021, we signed a deal with them, a private equity firm called New Mountain Capital.
Congratulations.
Yeah, interesting process. One that I had not been through. Certainly, as a construction litigator, I'd never been through a take private sale of a public company.
So, do you have any advice for attorneys who may need to go through that process in their career going private?
You want to get yourself a really good firm that has been through the process and can steer you appropriately. And I was very fortunate to work with some fantastic attorneys at Sherman and Sterling, led by John Marzulli out of their New York office. And so I'll tip the cap to them, as I have privately. They did such a great job, not just running the chains of the deal, but also ensuring I was fully educated as the chief legal officer in the company on what was coming, what had to be done, what needed to be done, how we should approach things. Fully engaged with me on a daily basis for 5 months until we got the deal finally across the finish line on May 15th. They were up all hours of the day, night, at beck and call. No question was too stupid by me. No matter how many times I would ask it, never got I'm sure it was, but they never let on that it was. But they were just really, really fantastic attorneys, not only from the technical standpoint of running the deal as our outside counsel, but ensuring that I understood it. And I understood as a CLO what the company needed to be considering well in advance of when it had to be considered. Now, a lot of that was hard work on me and my team's part too, to ensure that we knew what was coming and that we were all prepared for every step of the way of the process. But they were certainly fantastic guys to work with, and women. And I can't say enough about them. Again, it's Sherman and Sterling's New York office. John Marzulli was the lead partner on the case.
And so, Mark, you're currently looking for a new role. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. When we closed in May, a number of us at the senior level signed transition agreements, whereby, depending on the individual, we would leave the company after a matter of weeks. My transition agreement ended July 31st. New Mountain brought in a new CEO who brought in his team that he'd been with for the last 15 years in the two companies he'd been at before. Good people, all of them. Enjoyed working with them for a short period of time. It's always a little strange feeling when you're transitioning your job to somebody else. But they were very professional, very pleasant people to work with. And I enjoyed the process as much as you can enjoy that. Part of you is giving away the baby that you put so much time and effort into over 8 years. But we were proud of where we got the company. We were proud of the result with the sale. And, I approached it as, look, this is a business transaction. And I told the CEO that came in the first day I understood he was bringing his team in, you should be bringing your team in. You need to feel comfortable and trust the people you work with, especially your chief legal officer. And there's no hard feelings on my part. That's just part of the deal. I think anybody going in-house, the one thing I would tell them, if you're leaving a law firm, especially an established practice at a law firm, is there is a lot out of your control that didn't used to be out of your control when you go to a company. If you go in and you're working for a general counsel gets hit by a truck, or a new CEO comes in. A new CEO brings in his team that he'd been with before, which has happened here. Board changes over, and suddenly the board is looking to sell the company. That's not what happened in our case, but a million different things can happen. Private equity companies are looking to buy you, and they come out of nowhere, and the company sets off on a sale process. None of that's in your control. And shouldn't be, because people need to be making the decisions at that high board level, especially on a public company being taken private. But you need to be prepared that you could be in a situation where you did everything right, so to speak. Like when you're in a law firm and you do everything right, you get promoted, you get more clients, you get good results, and you spend your career there, and you get the gold watch on the way out 30 years later. You can do everything right and be the best damn attorney in the world in-house, but there are a lot of things that can happen, and you no longer will have your job, or your job will be in jeopardy. And it doesn't have anything to do with you. You just have to understand that going in with your eyes open. And I guess I did understand that, but probably not to the extent I probably should have, because when we were doing our pros and cons list, I wasn't really thinking it in those terms. But I wouldn't change a thing, Chris. Knowing what I know today, I would still make the exact same decision I made in September 2013. Still leave the firm and go to Aegion and still have this great 8 years of experience. And so now, like you said, I'm looking for the first time in my whole career, looking for a job. I'm not looking super hard yet. I'm taking a breath, but I do have some lines in the water. I'm working with some good people. And I've been talking with a number of your contemporaries at a number of different recruiting companies about some opportunities. So we'll see where that leads.
That's excellent. I'm sure it won't be an issue for you. It's a great market to be looking to. Mark, let's jump into this notion of leadership. I know that it's a subject you're passionate about. How do you define leadership?
It's a nebulous question, but one I've certainly thought about over the last few weeks as I get ready to potentially be interviewing with a couple companies here. To me, leadership is all about acting by example. You and it might be trite. To me, a good leader is somebody that earns the respect of the people that he works for, works with, and who work for him, and earns that on a daily basis, and demands that those people that work for him treat everyone else with that same level of respect. You never want to ask people to do something when you're a leader that you either hadn't done yourself or wouldn't do yourself or aren't doing yourself. A good leader rolls up his sleeves or her sleeves and leads by example. A good leader is trustworthy and honest, doesn't hide the ball. It can lead to some uncomfortable conversations with the people that you're leading, but they're better for it. You're better for it. Your team's going to be better for it if you have those conversations. The worst thing a leader can do, in my opinion, and I've probably gone way over on this definition for you, but the worst thing a leader, in my opinion, can do is ignore problems when they arise with their teams. You can't kick that can. Not only is that not good for the person who's having the issue that should be addressed, it's not good for the company, and it's not good for the team you're leading. Because if somebody is acting in a way that isn't appropriate for the team you're leading, they're all seeing that and they're reacting poorly to it too, and it creates a bad environment. You have to be honest with people about where they stand in their careers. You can't tell everybody that comes to the door you're the next general counsel and just keep it up, because they're not, right? They aren't going to go certain places in their career just because of a number of different factors, depending on who they are and what the opportunities are in their career. But if you're honest with people and you treat them with respect and you give them great opportunities and you empower them to perform, you get great things out of them. And a big thing about leading legal teams at Aegion that I always tried to do was empower my teams. I never wanted people to feel like they couldn't take a chance on something because I'd get mad at them. I'm not a yeller or screamer. I'd rather people be taking chances and making decisions and moving things forward for the company than locked up and afraid to make a decision, afraid to make a call, and leading to a culture of no. And so I try to empower my teams to be able to go out there and make those decisions, not be afraid to trust their judgment, seek advice when they needed it from me, work autonomously when they felt they could, never feel afraid that I wouldn't support them with our colleagues or with senior management on one of their decisions. I think a good leader, points to the team for the successes and points to themselves for the bad things, right? And so I always wanted my team at Aegion and at Greensfelder before that to feel like their leader was going to have their back. Their leader was going to let them grow in their profession. Their leader was going to let them take chances and trust their own judgment. Their leader wasn't going to micromanage them. And their leader was going to be there for them anytime they wanted to come in the office, come in my door, sit down and talk about anything, whether it was work or personal issues or just get something off their mind or whatever it happened to be. And I felt like I had that, when I left Aegion with my legal team there, and I hope they felt the same way. I hope they all progressed in their careers, professionally, personally, et cetera. And I hope they all go on to do great things. And I'll tell you what, if I ever get the opportunity to hire some of them back, I absolutely will, so long as I'm not violating a non-solicitor, non-compete, or non-hire clause. At some point, your careers can intertwine again in the future, I guess. I'll stop there and let you follow that up.
Thank you. No, I just really appreciate your candor, and I think it's very well said. Let's pivot to family. So you married a lawyer, and did you two meet at Greensfelder?
No, it's a long story. I mean, do we have another hour? I'll go into, no, we met, actually. We met on a cruise our senior year of high school. I went on a senior cruise for spring break with 100 kids from Lindbergh High School in St. Louis. And she joined that cruise with 8 other girls because their parents didn't want to send them to Mexico with their senior trip. And so somehow they got the brilliant idea that their girls would be better off on a trip with 100 Lindbergh kids that they didn't know, than going down to Mexico with all their friends. We were seated at the same table. Back in those days, cruises, you had a table assignment where you ate every night. And Wendy's her name. Wendy was at my table. And I'll get gushy for a second. I remember when Wendy stepped on the plane to fly to Miami for the cruise. And I remember seeing her get on the plane. I was sitting in the back. I remember what she was wearing. And I thought, this is somebody I'd like to get to know. And then we were assigned to the same table, and we became very, very good friends very quickly. Even went to proms together that year. Turns out, though, Chris, our sisters, who are 8 years older, played softball together when they were kids. And they were on the same team, and the moms would pass Wendy and I around. We were the babies in the stands on the teams. So our parents knew each other and had known each other our whole lives, and we just had never met or never realized we had met. So, we were very close then. We went off to college. I went to Northwestern. She stayed in Missouri schools. And we stayed in touch, but, we weren't dating or anything. We met again in law school. I found out that she was coming to law school the next year to WashU, called her up. We got together. We spent a lot of time together. We were both with other people through the majority of law school. But she and I were very, very close friends all through that period, stayed close friends. I introduced her to Greensfelder because I knew she'd love it. She'd fit right in. And then at some point after she came to Greensfelder, things developed in a different direction, and the rest is history, right? So
that's so fun. And it's really neat to know that you guys knew but didn't know each other as even children through the parents. That's really nice.
She's literally been stalking me my whole life, Chris. And it's embarrassing to say that, but it's obviously true.
Clearly true. It's been all over. So I love it. So she's an attorney, and she was at Greensfelder. I think she was the head of litigation. Is that correct? Yeah. And then she went in-house also? Yeah,
she actually transitioned to the board of directors at Greensfelder and spent some time there as well. 2 years after I left the firm, she left and went to Scottrade in their legal group. Scottrade was bought by TD Ameritrade, and they kept her on in the legal group. I think she was the only attorney they kept on. Not surprising. She's fantastic at what she does. And at some point in that process, she continually advocated to TD Ameritrade to provide her with a business role. She always wanted to get into the business side of things. And they did. Not surprisingly, they saw some merit to that. And they created a role, head of retail for her they created 3 segments, and they put her in charge of one of them. That's and I'm probably butchering what it was actually called, but and it was like, Xanadu for her. It was her dream job. And of course, because it was her dream job, 6 months later, Schwab came and gobbled up TD Ameritrade and changed everything back. And she's still on the business side. She didn't stay with them on the law side. But they put her in charge of the integration for 6 or 8 of the streams of integration between the 2 companies. So right now her focus is on that integration, and she's gotten over a couple of those milestones, and there's still a few more to go.
I'm sure that's a hefty integration to take those 2
together. Yeah, it is. And she works her butt off and has gotten great results, and deserves all the accolades that she could get.
That's wonderful. And you guys have 2 kids, correct?
Yeah, we've got a 16-year-old son, Jack. He's a junior in high school, and a 14-year-old just turned 14 yesterday. Daughter, Sydney, who's an 8th grader.
So fun. And so what are you doing as a family to try to blow off steam and get away from work?
So half of the year, we have a lake house that's 1 hour away. Nice sized lake, allows motorboats, jet skis, and things like that. We bought it 6 years ago, and when COVID hit, that was our home away from home. We were down there constantly, and that's continued. I mean, this summer we were down there nearly every weekend from May or late April until September. The kids are getting to that age where they've got that fear of missing out, and they don't want to miss out on whatever's happening Friday night. And do we have to go to the lake now? And that's a little frustrating, but for the most part, it's been fine still. They bring down friends. We have close friends that have a place down there that have the same schedule we do in terms of coming down. Their kids are our kids' ages. They've all grown up together. They're like cousins, best friends, and they have a giant group of friends that each family brings down. And so it's just a constant full weekend of seeing kids having fun, which I love. They're not looking at their screens. They're out there jet skiing or wakeboarding or doing whatever, which is great.
Making memories. That's important.
Yeah.
So pivoting to the last question, Mark, if you weren't an attorney and that actually would not been an option for you to do, what else would you have done in life?
If I had my druthers, somebody from Hollywood would have called me up one day and said, you don't need to have done any technical training. We just want you to come be an A-list movie star right now and put me on the cover of People. Acting, I always thought would have been the best job in the world. But I had no interest in going to theater school. I had no interest in being in plays, but I love to act. And looking back on it, I wish I had switched my interest. And my interest was probably because I didn't know the kids in those theater programs. And at Northwestern, when I went there, it was a great theater program and had friends that ended up being in movies and TV shows and, our household names. But it wasn't for me. And, I never saw that long-term, viability for me. Looking back on it, if I could have done anything else in the world, it would have been go be an actor somewhere and live that lifestyle. Problem was there's a lot of struggling actors, and I'm pretty sure I would have fallen into the struggling actor camp, and that just didn't appeal to me whatsoever at any point in my life. And I'm still waiting for the call from Hollywood to just come out of nowhere and put me at the top of the bill. But
if you were to step straight into a set for certain movies or genre, what would that be?
I'd love to do comedies.
Would you really?
That'd be
That's
great.
so fun.
I think it'd be so much fun. I was just talking the other day with a friend of mine about, remember the movie Cannonball Run, from like 1980, maybe 1982. Okay. Oh my God, Chris, how do you not know Cannonball Run? The cast of that movie are some of the all-time great funny people from the 70s. And I could only imagine how much fun it would have been to shoot those scenes day in and day out and be with that group of people, all funny people at the top of their game, just having a wild ride. Same thing today. I don't know, there's a million different movies that we watch as a family and that we like, but any comedy would be great. I'm never much for a drama guy. Don't think I would want to be a dramatic actor. I don't think romantic comedies in my cards either.
Mark, it's been an honor and a pleasure today. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, this is great.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you haven't already, please take a moment and subscribe. Also, we would love your feedback. You can leave feedback in 3 easy ways. You can go to the blog post on our website. You can click Give Feedback link in the show notes on your device. And then thirdly, you can text the phrase LFL podcast to the number 44222. That's LFL PODCAST. And thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.